The parameters that I chose for my graph were babies per mother by income. And the reason that I chose these parameters were to address potential problems involved with a lack of legal representation and resources for low class women within the poorest regions in the world. And I think that this lack of resources, legal or otherwise, could leave a drastic effect on a population's demography. So my data is showing a very clear correlation between babies per mother and income. The United States, which is one of the countries that I chose to focus on, um, as one of the richest continents in the world. And countries within Africa, which I also focused on, are some of the poorest locations in the world. And you can see that within my graph even over time, which I'll get into in a moment. We can see that over time, America adapts to become wealthier, and as they become wealthier, as does their rates of baby per woman goes down. So as they get wealthier, the rates of babies per woman goes down, and where they begin on the graph is sort of income babies per woman. They're very low income, very high babies, and as they go along the x-axis, getting wealthier and wealthier, their babies that they're having, the amount of children per woman is going down and following the income that's getting higher. And a lot of other countries do this too. So there's a ton of other wealthier countries like those in Europe, United Kingdom, Ireland, Paris. They're not Paris, France. They're all following the United States in this trend of getting wealthier and having less babies per woman. So I think that that shows a very clear correlation in and of itself that income has a lot to do with how many babies a woman has. However, the three countries within Africa that I choose to focus on, even over time throughout the 1800s, I mean, in the 1800s, all of the countries represented on the graph are all in this cluster of low income, many children per family. And of course, as time progresses, and we get more resources, we get more money, we get more expertise in medicine, we get more resources for pregnancy prevention and legal representation for unfortunate things like rape and those sort of preventative measures. As time goes on, and like I said, we gather those things, um, the countries who can afford to relish in those opportunities see less and less pregnancies per woman. And so throughout the 1800s and 1900s and up until like about 2019, I think is when the chart stops, you see that progression of countries gaining those resources, getting wealthier, and ending up with less children. However, the three countries in Africa that I focused on, even up until this day, remain almost exactly where they were in the early 1800s, which is insane to me. Like that like actually floored me that they have remained in almost the exact same spot. And I think that a reason for this is, like I said, as we developed resources like pregnancy prevention resources, pregnancy education, abortions, legal representation for rape, incest, unfortunate circumstances like that, um, and also the medical equipment to ensure that the babies we do have don't die. I think that Africa, those the three countries in Africa that I have boldened on my graph, I think that due to the fact that their income has remained extremely low, that would be a reason why, while everyone else has progressed, they have remained the same. So I think that they can't afford those resources. They can't have the same legal representation that we do for rape. And they're also maybe, if they have 10 kids, there's a good chance five or six of them will die. So they're having a lot of children. Um, so I think that given that these countries have remained almost unchanged, the three countries within Africa, it appears that their birth rate, death rate is high enough. So the amount of deaths per birth is equal enough and is happening frequently enough that it's able to sustain this cycle of women having many children. Like, I think that if their environment wasn't enough to sustain the pattern that they're currently in, it would have changed. Or if it had more resources to sustain a different pattern, like them having less kids and more money, it would change to that pattern because the sustainability would be different. But I think the sustainability of their life has remained exactly the same as it did in the 1800s. And for that reason, it makes sense that their birth rate, death rate wouldn't really have changed much. Um, so I think that that sort of explains their growth rate of population and our like lack thereof. Um, I think that even in the like 1960s when we went through a baby boom phase, there was explanations for that other than lack of resources because we certainly had the resources to prevent such like an influx of population. But yeah, like I said, I think that, and I know that in the TED talk that we were given, he also does babies per child per income sort of, but I chose to do those exact parameters because I think that there is a lot more to do with resources of pregnancy prevention than what was said, and so it's like a visual representation of my graph. I have these two stacks of cups to represent babies per mother, and I'm going to have this stack represent the United States, and this stack represent the poorest countries within Africa. So in the 1800s, we're pretty much equal. We're here. As time progresses, the United States kind of slowly moves away, losing about one average per child every like 50 years. We get richer, less children, and less children, and then Africa kind of maybe goes about that much until we are where we are today. Not, yeah. So you can see that this gap represents about almost 200 years of difference. The United States has gone all the way up here and has gone down by that many average children per family, per mother, and Africa has remained here. And due to the fact that my parameters are babies per mother over income, like I said, there is a very clear there's a very clear situation going on where income most certainly does affect babies per mother. And I think that a large reason of that is the sustainability of the population isn't able to sustain life and isn't able to create resources for pregnancy prevention. And so both keep happening rapidly in places like Africa. Whereas in the United States, we obviously have those resources and a much lower death rate. And so we're going to have a very different growth rate of population. So that is my lab presentation.